How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Chair Talk. Guys, I want to follow up again on the Mechanicville 6, but I want to talk more about the welfare checks from law enforcement, how it works. So my guest today is going to be retired Lieutenant Joseph Pingaro. He's been on my show multiple times before, and we are going to try to answer your questions related to how welfare checks work, and we'll see how that applies to this case, what should have been done if it is as reported by the husband, which if he does have those dates, I'm sure they could be documented somehow. So I'm sure there's some proof that either there was a request or there wasn't a request. But we're going to treat it as just general knowledge of what should have or should not have been done during these welfare checks, especially when no one's answering the door. So I'm going to kind of provide a summary of the case real quick for Joe. But if you guys are not familiar with this case, please look at my other couple of videos. I've covered everything from the initial case findings, whatever we have, to the custody battle that may have led to the circumstances of the suicide, the murder/suicide, some probable theories, including a theory that I put in the end of my most recent video dated today, as well as a short in which it's probable. I'm not saying it happened, but you got to put it into context. It's probable. And then this, I think, will be another avenue. We have to talk about welfare checks because supposedly the bodies were not found for a few weeks. And that's after the father is saying he asked for welfare checks. So I got a lot to go over with Joe, but hey, Joe, you mind introducing yourself?
Absolute, Anthony. Thank you for having me on, and hello to your audience. I am a retired police investigator, police lieutenant. I have my own podcast on YouTube. It's the Blue Heart webcast. It's law enforcement kind of based, but there's a lot of stuff there for everybody. I write books. I have a couple of books out on police investigation. True crime would probably love it because I tell a story in a double murder case like you're reading a novel, and then I explain how to investigate those things. So you can find those books at Blue 360 Media. So I appreciate you having me on, Anthony. It's nice to always be here.
Appreciate coming on. And guys, just so you know, again, this is, I think, my third long-term video on this topic. This is the grandmother. That's the mother. That's the 4 children. So let me give Joe some backdrop here. So in Mechanicville, New York, 6 family members were found dead inside a second-floor apartment. 64-year-old grandmother Amy Stedman, her daughter Sarah Myers, and Sarah's 4 children, Harper Hudson, and 10-year-old twins Gavin and Gracelyn. Police say the deaths appear to be a criminal event, not a natural tragedy. The working theory is that there was intentional poisoning using prescription and over-the-counter medication, and that one of the children also suffered fatal sharp force injuries, while the other likely died from the poisoning. They're also saying that the drugs, over-the-counter, whatever it was, could have been intravenously put into the children because there were syringes found. And we already kind of discussed our theories on it. The last couple of videos, we put what we feel are good, relevant theories based on the evidence. And then in the last video I wanted to add another theory because the sharp force injuries, I think, also could take you into another direction. So investigators found a handwritten note inside the apartment that they say strongly suggests Amy was involved in the deaths, and they're treating her as the primary suspect. We don't know what the note says, by the way. Toxicology and the final medical examiner findings are still pending, but multiple outlets now describe this as a suspected grandmother-driven murder-suicide. Again, that's based on limited information. We don't know what the note says. A lot of people also saying the mother could have been involved. This could have been a shared partnership. The mother could have been the primary, and the grandmother could have did what she could to protect her daughter. Underneath all of that is a long interstate custody war. Sarah and her ex-husband, Brady Harmon, had joint custody under a Utah court order. Sarah had school year custody in New York. Brady was supposed to get the kids every summer from July 1st to September 1st in Utah. After 6 years of fighting, a final parenting plan was signed in April 2026, and a contempt hearing for Sarah was set for June 29th over alleged violations of that plan. The kids were due to travel to Utah for the summer of July 1st. Instead, on June 23rd, police found all 6 bodies. Brady says he was days away from a reunion he waited for since 2019. So a lot of people think the trigger to this was the custody for the summer, and maybe the fear of not getting the kids back. And then there's conflicting stories from what Brady says to what's found on Sarah's GoFundMe page. That was all discussed in the last video I did. And by the way, Joe, if you ever watched a case and you feel like there's other angles you can cover, or in any case I do, hit me up, man. Don't always have me chasing you because your intel is phenomenal. I just don't want to bother you because I know I follow your stuff. I know you're always busy. And when I retire, I got my conferences lined up. So I'm going to be just like you. I want to be just like you when I grow up. I'm actually, me and the family are going to New Hampshire for a conference that was actually paid for. Well, it's going to be training for their correctional staff that was paid for them. And they actually allowed for me to have my family so I can do the training and then enjoy that week off because it's only 2 4-hour sessions. So for the rest of the 6 days, it allows me to spend time with my family because that was the concern. I have 1 more year left. I don't have a lot of time. But if you can incorporate family time with the training, then where do you want me to be?
Right, absolutely. That's that's what I did the last couple of years. My company, where I do threat assessments. I go all over the country doing threat assessments for schools and businesses and religious facilities. So I had them hire my wife to be my assistant. And then when I traveled to Napa Valley for an assessment, we got to go to Napa Valley, and then we went to Dallas, and we went to New Orleans, and we went all over the place. And we usually stretched them out a little bit into a little vacation. So it was nice.
Yeah, that's my goal, Joe. I have a few PowerPoints that are dedicated training that I know that I can be able to get anywhere else because it's from my own experiences. And eventually when I retire, I would like to bring the wife and family in on that. Now, but yeah, if you see any of the cases I follow, if there's something, even a perspective that you can add that I don't think of, please, I'll put you right on.
Yep,
now, I want to. All right, so I want to give a quick little summary, one more quick little summary before we go in. I have 5 questions for you. Now, this is related more towards the welfare check, so I'm going to narrow it down a little bit. So before we bring in our guest, even though you're already on, I want to lay out the welfare check timeline because it's a critical piece of how the case unfolded. So the children's father in Utah, Brady Harmon, says that after his last video call with the kids on June 7th, he suddenly couldn't reach them or their mother, Sarah. Between June 13th and June 19th, he says he requested 4 separate welfare checks from Mechanicville police. And I do have the dates of those 4 checks in my last video. Officers later said they checked both Sarah's apartment and Amy's apartment in that complex because they both live in the same complex. And by the way, the children and the mother were found dead in Amy's apartment, which would be Sarah's mother, the children's grandmother. But they never made contact with anyone inside. Then several days later, a neighbor calls police about a strong odor and flies at the window. Officers return, go into Amy's unit, and find all 6 family members dead. Based on decomposition, it's clear they've been there for some time. We don't have a time frame yet, but people are starting to believe that it's around 2 weeks, give or take, from the last moment he was able to speak to them. So I think it was June 7th or something, give or take, because then when he tried to reach out to them again, she said they were sick. Then several days, so we have multiple welfare check requests over several days, at least 2 apartment checks, no entry, and then a neighbor's call that finally triggers a full search and the discovery of 6 bodies. That raises serious questions about how welfare checks are supposed to work when nobody answers the door, and what should happen when you have children, a high-risk custody situation, and repeated requests from a parent who's clearly alarmed. Now, remember, he lives in Utah. She lives in Mechanicville, New York. So I wanted to bring on Joe. So first question I got, and I'll give some context for each question. There's 5 here, if that's okay.
Sure.
Looking at this timeline, welfare check request report on June 13th, June 16th, June 17th, and June 19th from the husband in Utah, ex-husband. And then the discovery on June 23rd after a neighbor calls about odors and flies. From a law enforcement perspective, when an officer is dispatched for a welfare check and no one answers the door, what is the standard step-by-step response? And on each of those dates, so June 13th, 16th, 17th, and 19th, so 13th and 16th, a 3-day gap, 16th and 17th, 1 day, 19th, 2 day. On each of those dates, what should have happened in terms of knocking, observing, trying other doors, contacting a landlord or property manager, and documenting the outcome?
All right, well, welfare check falls under a part of policing that's known as community caretaking. Community caretaking is a function of a law enforcement agency in every community, everywhere, where it's not just enforcing law. Sometimes you are the last stop, the last resort. Grandma's heat goes out. Who's she going to call in the middle of the night? They call you. It's part of what we do as law enforcement is to, protect and serve. Well, that's really what the whole thing is there. So a welfare check the extent to which you go in a welfare check requires some information to make a decision. So if somebody says, I haven't seen somebody in 2 days, can you go check on them? You're going to go and knock on the door, obviously, and nobody answers. If you can see in a window, you would look in the window. You should check with neighbors. When's the last time you saw this person? If there's a landlord or a building manager, maybe they have some film. I don't know. They got video security. When's the last time you saw these people? Have you heard anybody in the apartment? Because the chance is they could have went on a vacation to Disneyland. Now, entering into someone's private home, if it's for criminal purposes, if I'm investigating a crime, I need a search warrant or consent from the owner to go into an apartment or a house, a car, a boat shed, whatever. Under the community caretaking standards, if the officer has concerns that the person inside might be injured, incapacitated, in need of help, you can go in. You can go in and take a look. You're not investigating a crime to hold someone accountable. You're going in there to make sure people are okay. The things that are going to make the difference there is, who are you caretaking for? A healthy 35-year-old person who might not be home, or somebody who's older, somebody who has concerns, health concerns, somebody who has a fall risk, they use a walker. You start to take these things into account when you're there. I would say,
hey, Joe, how do you find out? How would they find out that information, though?
That would be the caller. You would ask the caller, hey, who are these people I'm going to check on? Well, it's my ex-wife and my children and their mother. I don't want to be, negative on any agency, because everyone makes these decisions based on the information they have in front of them, how busy they are, what's going on, what does it look like. We have all seen scenes in movies where the cop will show up and knock on the door, in Home Alone. That was a very good one. The cops, I left my kid home alone. He knocks on the door. He looks around. It looks all right. There's nobody here. And he leaves. The concerns you brought up about the court order and supposed to be going somewhere, that would raise my concerns, where at that point I'd be conducting a very thorough on-scene investigation. I'd be knocking to all the, have you heard them in there? Have you heard people around? Is their mail piling up? Have they not picked up their mail? If people haven't picked up mail, there's a reason. Normally you tell, hey, do me a favor, Anthony, I'm going to Florida for a week. Can you grab my mail for me, right? Because that's a burglary sign. It looks like, oh, there's mail, nobody home. So that kind of thing. So I would have myself done a deeper investigation, especially because of the circumstances. The father's calling saying there's a concern. We know that there's some kind of a court order. Who knows what would have been uncovered by that? And that goes into your investigative hypothesis that you said you've already addressed a lot of these, what ifs. That's the investigative hypothesis. Were they going to find out something about this woman, her lifestyle or something that would have prevented her from getting the kids back? That could have been an impetus for her to take action, that kind of thing.
Well, so out of curiosity, before I get to the second question, because I have 5 questions that were sent by my audience, but if Joe had a second, I want to do some follow-up. So whoever's initially taking the call, they're obviously trying to discern, what's the need for the check? Why do we not assume the person's not there? I guess that's kind of what the foundation would be. And the questions I'm going to ask is, we have to make an assumption that the person is there. So first thing I would say is, well, why would you assume the person is home? Why would you not assume that they're out? And, and then try to build some context. But is there ever a moment where, whenever the initial call comes in, that someone could say there's just not enough evidence to do the welfare check at all, or they're automatically going to do it, but based on the information is how serious they're going to follow through with it?
Yeah, it's the information that you get. It's going to make the difference. The dispatcher, whoever answers the call, if they're not sure whether or not to send the cop, they're going to talk to a supervisor. Listen, I got this call. What do you think? And I can't imagine a supervisor wouldn't say, when you have a car free, send them by to knock on the door and see if the people are there. Make sure you get the caller's name and number, get as much information as you can. And then it would depend. The more urgent it sounds, the more action you have to take. So if it's just like, hey, I haven't been able to get in touch with them on 2 days, I'm supposed to pick the kids up in 3 days, and nobody's answering the phone. Okay, that's not on its face an urgent, oh my God, maybe they killed everybody or they took off. You wouldn't necessarily think that right away, but you'd send a car over, go bang on the door, see if somebody answers.
Yeah, and then I don't know if there's like what the heck? I don't know if there's like a standard set of questions that they would ask that people would know that, okay, we should do a check because there's reason to believe that something, something tragic could have happened at the house, or there's just not enough. But either way, it doesn't matter. When they go to the house, they have to treat it as if the worst could have happened, correct?
Well, no, you don't necessarily do that. I mean, how many times do we do welfare checks? Thousands and thousands and thousands of welfare checks are done. And most times it's something innocuous. The people are just not home, or maybe they're annoyed with the husband. They're just not going to answer the phone. When you start to hear these other factors, though, when you start to hear that there was a court order, that's going to would raise my concerns, and I would instruct my officers to go further. You can't go wrong getting a key to an apartment and having them open the door, and you walk in and everybody's in there, eating their lunch. Okay, it would be shocking for the people that the police walked in the door, but the police are not there conducting a criminal investigation. They're there checking for your welfare. They see everybody. Oh, you're okay. That's why we came in the apartment. Okay. And then you get information from them. We don't want to talk to that guy. We don't want to hear from him. Okay. Now you can go back and tell them we checked on him. Everybody's good. But it depends on the urgency and the information.
All right. Now you may have covered some of this, but I still got 4 more questions. If there's anything else that you feel you can add, even if it's already covered, let me know. Sure. In a situation like this, where you got multiple missed welfare checks, an out-of-state parent reporting sudden loss of contact, children between 10 and 13, and then eventually a neighbor complaining about a foul smell, will usually count as exigent circumstances that justify going into an apartment without a warrant or with the landlord's assistance. When you look specifically at that June 13th to the 19th window, are there points where under typical policy you would expect officers to move from a knock and leave approach to actually making entry to verify everyone's safety? Kind of touched on that, but
yeah. Let's look at this for a second. When you ask about policy, is there protocol? One of the things we find in law enforcement across the country, there are thousands and thousands, 17,000 different agencies. Excuse me. They all have different policy, procedure. They're led by different people who value one thing over another. Maybe they are a very busy location. Sorry, Anthony, I got this little cold brewing here.
That's fine.
So what happens normally in a situation is when you have a case like this that brings this to the fore, where all of a sudden we realize, hey, do we have a policy? What would we do if we got all of these calls? How do we go over it? And that's a matter of training. I know in the missing persons area, there were many times, we all saw it. We've all seen it and heard about it. Somebody reports somebody missing. Well, until they're missing for 48 hours, we can't do anything. Till we started to find out there were cases where people were kidnapped, they were murdered. There was all kinds of negative things that happened that we should have taken it seriously from the first call. So one of the things that I've done is I reached out to experts, and we actually created a course for law enforcement on conducting proper missing person cases, because a lot of agencies will go, oh, okay, so maybe they went away. What's the big deal, right? So this is going to be the same kind of a thing. There is no set protocol. There is no set policy. Individual agencies, counties might have certain policies on what you do, but it's not uniform in any way, shape, or form. And again, like I said, just from having experience, if you just told me, hey, can you go knock on Anthony's door, and Anthony's a single, healthy guy, and the neighbors go, no, but he's always going somewhere. He's probably been gone. Okay, if I could look around, I don't see him. After a second call or a second concern, or you start adding facts to that, Anthony's been very upset lately. He got divorced, and he's been, complaining he doesn't get to see his kids. Now, my natural instincts are going to say, hey, what do people do when they're depressed? You can't count on who's going to commit suicide, who's going to do what. So maybe now, hey, Mr. Landlord, do me a favor. Can you unlock the door? I'm going to go in and take a look and make sure Anthony is not laying on the floor because he took himself out or something else happened. When you hear that, and then you see how that's how the facts pattern starts to build, and that information is vital. After, one call, some agencies would have went right in. Other agencies might have waited and got the second call. Okay, it's one day. Maybe they're not home. The neighbors don't know nothing. We don't see anything that looks at a place. Maybe they couldn't see in. It could be an apartment building. You can't see. There's no windows to it that you can look in. And it would be the experience probably of the officer on the scene that would say, I saw this once before when something like this happened. I'm just going to go in and check, because you're not committing a burglary. And you're not going in there to look for their drugs that they're selling or illegal guns. You're going in there to make sure people are okay. So it comes down to an individual decision, often of how to proceed further.
Yeah, and they were also on the. I think they were found on the second floor, so it'd be hard to look through the windows there too.
Yeah.
I don't. So my thing is, I picture the husband calling. His concern being directly with Sarah and not letting me connect with the kids. And maybe the first request is Sarah's house, where the kids would be. But maybe he could also say, and if you can't find them there, I've been trying to reach out to Amy, which is her mother. So I'm assuming what if I was him, I would have reached out to Sarah first. What's going on here? Reach out to Amy, which is her mother. Like, I'm trying to get in touch with my kids because, they're immediate to each other. Right. Amy is directly involved with the raising of these children. So now you have two areas. And then I'm assuming once he couldn't get in touch with Sarah and the kids, couldn't get in touch with Amy, then he calls for the welfare check and expresses it to be done in two areas. Because if I was the officers and I was checking, then I would like to know, who else have you called that would be within her immediate circle? And then maybe we could do the follow-up. Because I've issued a lot of welfare checks because I work in corrections. We have a lot of employees sometimes, because of errors, maybe operations, whatever it is, you have no call, no shows. So we allow for some level of reconciliation, some hours. But if we can't, we do start making phone calls and try to track down where that individual is. And believe it or not, if we can't, we continue to go, because there's liability of not, finding out what happened and then leaving it out in the open. So we will eventually push for a more, you got to give us an answer. This is, he's not home or she's not home. Okay, but I need something. We've called the emergency contacts. They don't know where they're at. So we need some definitive answer, because if we don't, then believe it or not, that workplace could be held liable, because, we're usually the first people to know that the person didn't report to work. That comes under the concept of, expected level of care. Okay, so there's this, it's unwritten, but it is considered part of what we're supposed to do, an expected level of care. So a simple concept to understand that is, in our modern world, we know that our businesses, our churches, our schools, all these places are prone to violence. We can have an attack on any one of those locations, and it happens. So the expected level of care for me as a parent sending my kid to the school is that the school contemplated we could be the victim of an attack. What are we going to do to prevent that? Do we lock the doors? Do we get special equipment? Do we train everybody? That's expected. If something happens then and you go to court and the judge says, okay, could you imagine that this would have happened in this day and age? And your answer, of course, has to be, well, yeah. Well, what'd you do about it? Well, nothing, because it'll never happen here. You're gonna lose, and you're gonna add a lot of zeros to whatever you're gonna pay out for your liability. Well, the same thing goes with a thing like this. And this is where I'm saying this is going to evolve. This case is high profile. And I think a lot of agencies now are going to start to go, okay, we fixed missing persons. Now what do we do about welfare checks? Are we going to set up some protocols? And there are, I'm telling you right now, there's cops out there right now, chiefs that are out there looking at this and going, hey, what do we do? What do we train our cops to do? And what do I expect my cops to do now that we know this is another case where this happened? What should we be doing going forward? Because I know that's what I would be doing. I'd be looking, what's our policy? What's our procedure? What are we teaching these cops? And then I'd say, okay, here's what I want to happen. You get a call, evaluate the information, and go take a look.
Take a look around the house, look around the yard, look at the mail, talk to the neighbors, talk to the friends. That's a great point. You would call other people in their circle. Have you heard from them? You know, when you say you have to send out somebody, you go further for one of your people, there's a unique factor of law enforcement that we know is a reality, is that the number one profession where people commit suicide is law enforcement. So if you get a cop that doesn't come to work, a corrections officer doesn't come to work, you have to add that in. Was he depressed? Did he have a problem? Is she having a bad time? You go to the house, you can't get them. You're gonna have to go in there and take a look, because that is a distinct potential in our business. Well, when you start getting these calls from the family member, I can't get through to nobody. I think a lot of people, their initial thought's going to be, it's a domestic situation. It's not like we're afraid that the father killed everybody and now he's reporting it. He's 3 states away or 5 states away. Maybe this woman took off with her kids. It's close to the time that she's supposed to give them up. Maybe she don't want to give them up. It took the mother and they got at it. Maybe they're at another, maybe they're just not answering the door. Well, once you hear that kind of a concern, and again, I'm basing it on my experience, what I would have done, I would have keyed my way in. I would have gotten a super and I would have went in the house, both houses right away, just to make sure, because there's a lot of extra factors here.
Right now they're posting now about the last social media post from the mother. In one post, she referred to herself as Mama Bear, and then photos shared online showed the family smiling together during holidays and everyday moments. Stedman also posted about her grandchildren, including one message that read, "Any day with a grandchild in my arms, on my lap, in my home, or on my mind is an amazing day." Some people believe that there could have been secrets that this family could have had in the dealings of their children that they didn't want exposed once the children went to Utah. But we don't know all that. That just was being tossed out there. I got 3 more questions for you, Joe. Sure. Checking multiple units in the same complex. I think we did this, right? In this case, police have said they checked both departments tied to the family, the mother unit and the grandmother unit, during those welfare checks. When a family is split across more than one unit in the same building or complex, is it standard practice that officers should check every associated unit each time a welfare check is requested? And if they still can't make contact, any of them, what is supposed to be the next step? We kind of covered that, right?
We did, and you know, multiple locations, even if it's not in the same complex, if it's across town or in multiple towns, it depends on your level of concern. You know, if your level of concern says, you know, hey, this woman was suicidal or she was really depressed. Okay, did she leave there and she go to someplace in Jersey? She's staying with a family member there. It starts to become, you know, you can see how it would morph from a welfare check to, we can't find these people, missing persons. Where are they? So one of the scenarios you'd have to put in your head, you'd have to say, I've seen this before. These things happen in these family cases where we see the father kill the whole family instead of giving the kids to the mother, or the mother does something to the children so that the father can't get them. Maybe part of your investigative hypothesis is maybe there is things going on that she wanted to get out of there or had some problem. This is a more unique case than just, like I said, go see Anthony. Haven't been able to get in touch with my buddy for a week. This is a family. There's a lot of things going on. And again, I'm not criticizing the PD. You don't know what else was going on at that time. The officers could have been busy, had a lot going on. I don't know Mechanicsville, but they go up, they knock, they talk to a few neighbors. Nobody's seen them. Okay, maybe they're not here. You know, after that first call, though, at that point, a supervisor, I think, should have stepped in and said, hey, this is the second call we got from this. Get a key and get in there. You know, go take a look.
And how would they, so you got the 4 calls. How is it documented that the first call was made? Now we're on the second. Now we're on the third. Who would be aware that, do they do a history or something to know that this is the second time? And do they let the officers know, hey, be advised, this isn't an initial welfare check. We did one couple of days ago, didn't make contact. Now we're doing one again. How would they know individually that they're working on multiple attempts here?
Sure. In our modern world, almost every agency, I can't imagine, doesn't have computer technology. And when you pop in an address, you would normally see how many times you've been there, what you've been there for, even if it was 3 years ago. That would pop up and say, oh, we were there 2 years ago for a barbecue on the deck that was inappropriate. Here's who we spoke to. So at that point, if, and again, there's so many factors here. If you have a dispatcher that took the call and say, hey, listen, this is the second call we're getting. They still haven't been able to get in touch with them. Okay, but what if it's a different dispatcher that doesn't know that, and their system doesn't track how many times we've been to a location? They might not know that, but you would think that the person calling would say, hey, I called 2 days ago and I still haven't heard from. Well, there's your cue. We called 2 days ago. Did we check? Yeah, you went and checked and found nothing, but this is unusual. So
I have
no policy unless it's individual department policy.
What about just as a follow-up in my mind? So if I'm officer, whatever, and the agency itself, we weren't able to make contact, right? So now, do I wait for someone to call the concern in again 2 days later, or is there any follow-ups that I do as the agency because it hasn't been closed off? Like, okay, we went at whatever 10 in the morning, nobody was there. Does the agency now not go back unless they're prompted, or does the agency maybe on their own accord check 3 hours later, or a couple hours later? I mean, how do we close it off to where the agency is okay? I mean, does the agency ever communicate with the people that made the call and said, hey, be advised, we haven't been able to locate them, but with that said, if they reach out to you, can you let us know, or we're going to be going back out there later today to check on them again?
Right. So there's a lot there. And again, we're talking about 17,000 different agencies. So if you had the officer go and they would call it in. It doesn't look like anything. I don't see anybody here. The agency would probably call back the caller and say, the officers checked, they didn't see anything. Let us know if you hear from them, or if you don't hear from them, and maybe we'll check again at a different time. Whether you go back there or not, as a patrol officer, I've had these kind of calls and I check, nobody's there. If I'm in the area later on, I might on my own initiative, take a look. Oh, now I see people on the balcony. Headquarters, I'll be out for a second and go knock on the door. Hey, your ex-husband's trying to reach you, and we checked earlier, you weren't here. Can you give him a call? And we would, document that either through the dispatch, putting the information into the call, or writing a short report or some kind of a documentation. As a supervisor, if I had this information, I might say, okay, 10-4 on that, nobody there. When you're back in the area again, check again later. Check again later, just see if we can find this person. Do we know where they work? Have they checked into work? Do they have social agencies they deal with? Have they checked in with them? Do they have an appointment? Gee, now you find out they missed an appointment with a social worker. They haven't been to work. Now it starts to really up the ante, and that can happen very quickly, or it can take a long time. But specifically to answer your question, again, it comes down to the individual supervisor that's sitting there listening to this call and say, okay, 10-4, check back again in a couple of hours, because I'm just being thorough. We want to know where these people are. If you got a minute, knock on the door. As the cop, I might go by again in a couple hours and take a look. They're not here. Talk to another neighbor. Hey, have you seen your neighbors in that apartment over there? No, I haven't seen them in a couple of days. And usually them kids are all over the place, right? Somebody tells you something like that. Then you're going to say, I don't know. The supervisor on duty can evaluate it and say, get a super over there and go inside and go and check and see if they're all right.
Well, so right. So I was thinking like this. Obviously, you mentioned that there's a lot of welfare checks. So the sense of urgency could erode. That's human nature. I get that, because when you roll the dice, most probably it's going to be these reasons. But once in a while, it is these. So unfortunately, urgency is the first thing to erode because of the frequency and the outcome, right? But I'm wondering also if it also gets lost between shifts, where would that information get exchanged from one shift to the other, saying, hey, by the way, we also did some welfare checks. These ones, unfortunately, we weren't able to close them off properly. Would you be able to continue to do these, maybe do another welfare check on your shift, or is it just forgotten about, and then you wait for the call 2 days later, and then it's like, oh yes, that's right, we went there 2 days ago, there was no resolution. let's go back now and check. So is more of it really just prompted on the caller as opposed to some level? I don't want to say it the harsh way, but hear me out. And you can interpret it, I don't mean it harsh. You know me, I'm very pro law enforcement. Is part of it prompted by what the caller's pushing forward, or like you said, because you mentioned your own initiative, the due diligence of the agency itself?
Well, I think there's a lot of that. The supervisor to supervisor briefing at the change of a shift. Usually you go over what happened during the day, if there was anything of significance, if there's anything continuing. Listen, we had 3 burglaries on Johnson Street, and the detectives are over there now. They're still there. They might need some help. They might, you pass that stuff on. If it was just a welfare check that seemed like the people are just not there, they may or may not exchange that. They may or may not pass that information. Again, it's the urgency. What happens in most of these cases, has been my experience, is that when somebody calls, it's because they have tried 3, 4, 5, 10, 15 times. They don't just go, well, they didn't answer the phone, let me call the cops right away, depending on the circumstances. My father-in-law is 93 years old and he lives alone. If I call over there and he doesn't answer the phone, my initial thought has to be, is he laying on the floor hurt? Does he need my assistance? So I would call one of the neighbors. Hey, can you go bang on the door and see if Ted's okay? And if they say, gee, he's not answering the door, but his car's here, I'm on my way over there first.
Yeah.
I got a key. I'm going to open the door and go in. No, Ted's sleeping. Oh, okay. Ted, the phone was ringing. I didn't hear the phone. Okay. Or Ted's laying on the floor. And at that point I call. If he was further away from me, he's only 1.5 miles away from me, but if he was further away and I'm trying to help him, at that point I might say, listen, I can't get over there. The neighbor can't get in. Could you send a cop over to take a look? I call the PD. Could you go take a look? And they say, listen, his car's here. We can't see anything in the window, but he's not here. I'd say, go ahead, go into the house. Here's the code, if I know the code, or here's the hidden key, or, all right, thanks. I'll give it a little more time, and I'll let you know if I get in touch with him. And then at that point, maybe, you go in through a door to a garage or something, because we need to check on this guy. He's 93, right? The urgency level there is, it could be nothing. Or, he's 93. You got to take that into account. He could have had a heart attack and died on the floor. What are you going to do? You have to go in there. And that, like you said at the beginning, we don't know all the facts here.
We don't
know all the details of what was going on, what was revealed in the custody agreements, and what concerns were there. The police know all of that information, and hopefully all of that went into their decision making.
And you said something so spot on, because my mother, she's in her 80s. After my dad died 9 years ago, she's on her own. So she lives about 20 minutes from me. So usually I call her every morning. It's kind of like our routine. And there was one morning where she didn't pick up the phone. Usually I call her on my way to work around 6:15 in the morning. And old people, they're up at that time. Forgot, no one, you have nothing going on. She gets up, as soon as she gets up, that's when she's up. So she can get up from anytime from 4 in the morning to the latest would be, I think, around 6. She's always up before I call her. And there was one moment where we didn't connect, and I was so used to the routine. She wound up going to a store next to her for some coffee. She was able to walk there. She doesn't drive, guys, so she was able to walk there. So it wasn't part of that normal routine, because our normal routine was having our phone call before she did anything. But I noticed that when I do welfare checks for the agency and we make calls, the agency does ask for our exhaustive efforts. And they do try to kind of pin you down to certain things that, maybe you should have done before calling them, because now they're going to wind up. It's not that they're not going to do it, but now they're going to do it and pull you in a little bit more. Like, okay, listen, have you checked here? Have you checked here? Have you done this? So you're right. So you made such a good point that by the time you're making the call, there is an assumption that you've gone through all these exhaustive measures, and the call is that last-ditch effort, because, people don't want to make the call. But you also mentioned something that's unique. Let's say your father-in-law is 93. That may want you to call the police a little, or help a little bit quicker, because of the vulnerability of his age and all these other things, where a mother, 4 children, a grandmother, I may not be so quick to automatically think the worst, but for someone that's not, it's like, let me just He could be a medical emergency right now. And I think the police understand that. How old is he? 93. We're on our way.
Right. 100%. And so all of these factors, when we look at things like this in hindsight, we look back and, we can try and connect dots that maybe at the moment we didn't see, right? You have a healthy woman with 4 healthy children. She's got her mother. She's living her life. She's doing things, and she's not answering the phone. Maybe she doesn't want to talk to the guy. You don't immediately think of a multiple homicide that took place. That I can't imagine that would be your first concern. If the husband lived in town and they were having trouble, okay, maybe I might say, well, maybe he did something to them, because my experience says that can happen. So maybe I would look at it differently. But just the fact that they were not there on the first thing, and you checked and you saw no obvious signs of anything, if she has a car and she gets around in the car and the car's there, okay, now that raises my level a little bit. But she could have went with a friend. Friend could have picked them up. We're all going to go to the beach, and they go in the friend's car. Those kind of things happen. It's that on-scene investigation. Initially, the information you get from the caller, what are their concerns? Do they think anything's wrong? You get there, you're going to look around, ask a few people, have you seen from them? Have you heard from them? No? Is that unusual? Nah, I don't see them every day. Okay, gee, but the car is here. Okay, the car is here. Your immediate people you're going to talk to are neighbors on either side or up and down, because they hear in an apartment complex. You hear people walking around, especially with 4 kids. You're going to hear them running around, making noise, dropping things, whatever. You might check with them. No, I haven't heard from them in a couple of days. And I haven't seen them around. That's going to raise my concern that maybe something did happen, or I don't know. I know from my experiences that I had that I am much more prone to key in or find a way in sooner rather than later, because I've come across not necessarily multiple homicides, but where we've had people who got injured, lived on their own, got injured, and they were in there for a day or two laying on the ground, elderly people. And, that comes, you get there and you go, gee, the car's here, the neighbors haven't seen them, this and that, the other thing. It doesn't hurt. Can you get the keys? Let me just go in and take a look. Gee, they're not here. Maybe they went somewhere, or there they are all dead on the floor. What happened here? Right.
Yeah, then I have 2 more questions. I think you kind of answered this, but it adds a little bit of a dynamic. So here the caller is a father from Utah with a long custody battle, saying he suddenly missed scheduled calls and can't reach his children or their mother. So you mentioned situational factors. How does the identity of the caller and those risk factors usually influence the way you handle a welfare check? And also, does an out-of-state parent reporting multiple missed contacts over several days in the context of a contested custody case typically trigger a different level of concern or response than a single neighbor call? And I also want to add one more thing, because you kind of touched on this, but I'm also looking at something else. Police also probably look at the limitations of the caller in an effort to do an exhaustive response. So if I got someone calling from Utah about their connected family in New York, they could the caller in Utah could be very limited in what they can do. So they may call a bit quicker because I'm in freaking Utah.
Right. No, I agree with that 100%, because I can't, if it's out of the ordinary that I call, and even though my wife and I are divorced or separated or whatever, and we have some kind of an arrangement in how we interact because of these children, and every time I call, she either answers the phone or calls me back in a reasonable amount of time. Hey, I'm sorry, I was tied up. What do you need? What do you want? What are you calling about? And then you find out that, I've been calling 6 or 7 times. I left messages. I called for her mother. You as a normal person, your anxiety level, I think, would go up. Not necessarily thinking they were all dead, unless there was previous violence or threats of suicide that you know about. Then you might listen. She's really depressed. I don't know what's going on. It changes the dynamic of what you're going to do. So if he just calls, listen, it's unusual. She's not calling me back. I'm supposed to get these kids. Can you go check? The initial thought would not be that everyone was killed, that it was a multiple homicide. The thought would be, it's a domestic. She don't want to talk to him. Maybe she's going to try and delay giving him the kids for the summer. Maybe there's some other concern she has, and she's just not answering. and you go, and you get there, it's always the on scene. It's one of those things that you can hear about something, but until you actually go there and experience what's going on, that's going to dictate how you do things. That and the combination of outside influences on your time availability. Again, you go there, nobody's screaming, hollering about murder or suicide. It's a domestic. Maybe she just don't want to talk to him, but you're knocking the door. Everything looks okay. Okay, well, she's not here right now. We'll check back again later. Okay, that's when you call them back and tell them. But if I go there and I see mail pouring out of the thing, I see the car is here, I see that the neighbors haven't seen anybody. Now, all of these things on scene provide you with investigative stimulus where maybe I need to do a little more. And sometimes there's very little to go on. And then other times there's more. And when you get multiple calls over, at least, the first one, I could almost see that, okay, we don't see anything that looks bad here. Nobody's complaining. Nobody heard gunshots, nothing like that. The second day you go there and say, this is really unusual. Key me in. You can't go wrong taking a look. And I know some sleuths out there are probably saying, well, what if you go in to take a look and make sure everybody's okay? And there you find they're manufacturing machine guns. Well, if you're permitted to be there and under community caretaking, you are permitted to be there, then that evidence could probably stay in. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about a missing family, people who are not answering a phone. But that's just another angle onto this, because there have been cases when somebody hears a fire alarm or somebody goes to check on somebody's welfare. And back in the day when marijuana was illegal, I remember a big case, a guy, they didn't see him for a couple of days. His parents were nervous. They keyed into the apartment and there was a huge grow and the guy got locked up and the evidence stayed in because they were there for a legitimate purpose, not a criminal investigation. So there's a lot of factors that weigh into this.
Yeah,
but
and
I do think this might change how we do things going forward, just like missing persons did when there's a couple of high profile cases that if we could have acted right away, if we had a protocol, we might have found this person, saved this person, whatever. You might see that somewhere. I tell you right now, people are working on policy somewhere in some PDs.
Well, no. That's why I think it's good for us to have this discussion, because that's how, if something has to change, I think this was something that surfaced more in detail in the discussion I had earlier today that I released, even when we did some more theories. And I wanted to mention one more thing. So I know even with the mindset of the officers or the mindset of the agency doing them, you said they're going to get a lot of welfare checks, right? So I do believe human nature urgency erodes because the outcome, are usually, not as extreme, the probability, because we may be going in, they're probably not dead. They probably, went off somewhere, blah, blah, blah. But if you look at the outcome as being, they just have to be found. That's the outcome of the welfare check. The outcome of the welfare check is somewhere along the line, they have to be found. You can't get so focused on where you may think the concern is going, but rather, if they can be found. And I'm wondering if there's any dialogue, because I've had it where the police will call us back with the update. And then they say, if you have any further concerns, call us back. And they kind of leave it on to you to kind of prompt them again. And it's like, you don't want to be annoying with it. But, if I was the person making the call, do I call the agency back in a few hours? Do I call them back within an hour? Do I keep on bothering them? I mean, at one point, does it feel like I'm bothering them? I mean, is there a window open for that level of persistency that if the cops can't find him and now you're at this level of final exhaustion, because I'm assuming at that point, the welfare check may be some final exhaustion and you're not getting any answers. Now, when the cops come up and say that they're not home, now the anxiety grows. It doesn't lessen. When the cops call you back and they say, we haven't found them, I could picture now anxiety growing, but then the family said, well, we can't call the cops again because they just did a check. We don't want to bother them. So what happens there?
Okay. So again, there's going to be varying responses from the 17,000 agencies that we have. Some are going to take it very seriously and they're going to look at this and say, oh, the guy's far away. Whole family's missing. maybe we should look into it a little more. Pass it on to a juvenile detective. Hey, listen, we had this call. They can't find this family. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Gosh. You want to follow up with it a little more, maybe make some calls, maybe do some things that, we're patrol. We're answering calls constantly. We looked, we don't see nothing. Maybe you want to follow up with it. Because you're right. It does start to flow into that missing person thing when people are anxious about, okay, I did as much as I could. I called all our friends that I remember their numbers. They stopped by the house. They didn't see nobody. Can I talk to a supervisor? Right? Or can I talk to a detective? You get that sometimes because, okay, I'm talking to the dispatcher. Now you talk to a detective. Listen, this is unusual, right? I'm letting you know this is really unusual. Even though we don't get along, we deal with about the kids all the time. She always calls me back. This is strange. Can you just take another look? The cops should never be upset that people are calling. They're calling, like you said, people don't want to call the police. They don't want to call the police, and they, okay, I have no resort left but to call the police. So you call. Do I think people feel, gee, I shouldn't bother them? Sometimes they do, and they don't make that second call. But the agency and the people that are there, the officers, from supervisors right down to the street people, should understand that, okay, the guy's in Utah and he can't get in touch with his wife and kids. There's going to be anxiety if he's going to call back again. Okay, listen, we just checked an hour ago. We'll check back in a couple of hours, might be the response. But if he waited all day, called friends, called other people, hey, listen, I don't want to bug you guys, but something's not right here. At that point, you would think that would prompt them to go, all right, we'll go take another look. No problem. And at that point, key in. That's the thing. Key in. Go take a look.
Right. So I love what you're saying because I'm wondering, obviously you have the immediacy of time, right? I mean, this was a call 2 days later. So I don't know if that lessens the urgency now that we're waiting 2 days, or I'm sure when the person calls, the person says, like the husband would have said, listen, now we're going on 3 days. So, the urgency should be heightened at that point. But like when the police give back their result, you got to assume the law enforcement is going to assume that I didn't give them an answer. So anxiety is going to be is going to rise with this individual. They're not knowing. Now, you figure people could act in two extremes here. One extreme could be they keep on calling and push liability towards the agency. I'm calling you. I'm noting my calls. If something did happen, I've called you guys 4 times, whatever the case may be. Or, depending on, demeanors, whatever it is, they could just decide, I can't call them again. They already gave us an answer. Is there something that could be put in play with an understanding of that dynamic where, one, a policy can control the need to persistently call and still take responsibility of the liability of checking, or to just also alleviate the family from the pressure of being concerned about calling again and being seen as a nuisance? Because I'm sure some people could see that. And people are like, well, it's my loved one. You'll do whatever you want for them, right? But depending on the response, there could be some that would say, hey, we just called them. I don't want to bother them again. Yeah. And then that also delays the process. Is there any way that there could be a policy developed with the understanding of those reactions where law enforcement may have to step up and say, you know what, we did it. We didn't find anything. But I love what you said, Joe. But we do have a plan where this will be revisited. So unless something changes, we'll call you back in a few hours, and kind of lead things where law enforcement has more of the control than responding once again from the family not getting answers.
Right. When you look at the factors that we're talking about here, experience tells us that in 99.9% of these kind of cases, the whole family is not dead on the floor. That's just a reality. They're not. They went somewhere else. They're not answering the phone for some other reason. They're not dead. It's not a massive homicide scene. But it does happen, right? So in making an investigative hypothesis, what we see a lot with investigators and officers in general is that they get an idea in their head of what it is, probably because based on their experience. It's always this, and I'm going with the wife is dead, the husband did it, and they focus just on the husband. And most times that's true, but a lot of times it's not true. And if you lock in to an investigative hypothesis with all your energy and not keep open other spaces, that's where you have a problem. So to answer your question, is there something that can be put in place? I think there is. I think that follow-up is something that should have been done. And I keep using the missing persons thing because I'm telling you, we used to say all the time, okay, they're missing, the 16-year-old kid's missing. Okay, 16-year-old kids, what do? They take off, go with their boyfriend, hang out at their friend's house. They don't want to talk to mom and dad. We're not going to spend a lot of resources. And then we send detectives out, and then the kid walks in the back door. Hey, what's going on? Right? That's a reality of things. And that bleeds its way into response. So since this is a very unusual circumstance, I think after, the first call you checked, it's nothing. There can be something in place that says, okay, if you were assigned this call, every 2 hours during your shift, go over there and just document, I checked. On a supervisor's part, they're listening to this and they're saying, okay, you went there this morning, nobody, you went there this afternoon. What else can you tell me? Is their car there? Is there mail there? Is this unusual? The caller said, you know what? Key into the apartment and go take a look. You can certainly set a protocol where you may not do that initially. Hey, I haven't heard from my brother. Give me the super and go right in. That might be jumping too soon with no other facts. My brother is sickly and he wasn't feeling well. I'm going right in. My mother, she's 87 years old. I'm going right in. The callers, when you talked about the callers, Anthony, people call up, they have anxiety and they want you to do everything right now because to them it's the most important thing in the world. And you go and you say, yeah, then nothing looks out of ordinary. Listen, what are you doing? Sitting around writing tickets? Get over there and find my mother. People start screaming and yelling. And then the dispatch, now, right or wrong or indifferent, now the dispatcher listens to this person screaming at them. They got 80 calls going on. We're doing what we can. Now you have a conflict between them. Okay, we just checked an hour ago. You keep calling, and as soon as I get a car free, we'll go back and check again. All of these things can be set up as protocol because this is important. This kind of a case like this might be the 1 in a million calls.
Yeah.
But you know what? There's going to be another million calls. There's going to be another one. So we need to address that one once we have factors.
I like what you're saying because then that standard does give some control to the responding agency, knowing, okay, unless there's something new that makes us need to go there now, we're planning on going back. And that also provides an answer to the family that it alleviates some anxiety of basically what's still in the process, as opposed to shit, the police called me, they haven't found them. Well, what's next? Well, what's next are follow-ups. So there's some lifting of the anxiety. And also I know it's tough because, going into an apartment or someone's home, people will say it's a violation of rights and, police can't just have the access to that. But that's why, as I said, they're looking for something definitive so they can lean on in case there is a concern. And then the support of the family as well, that gives you the extra context. And the last question I got here, Joe, is from a professional standpoint, when you look at this sequence, June 7th, last contact, 4 welfare checks requests from June 13th to the 19th. I think it was June 13th, June 15th, June 16th, and then June 19th or June 17th. Either way, let me give you the days. I like to keep things specific. Give me the exact days. June 13th, June 16th, June 17th, and June 19th. So there was a 3-day gap, a 1-day gap. I apologize. And then a 2-day gap. So those reported checks at both departments, and then June 23rd, odor and flies leading to the discovery of 6 bodies. That means from June 19th to June 23rd, there's no checks at this point. Right. So we have a pattern of checks, and then there's 6 days where there's no checks until a neighbor calls. So somewhere along the line, the husband probably stopped making the calls because he only said he made 4, but now we're 6 days with no confirmation. What lessons would you want departments to take away from this? If a department gets repeated welfare check requests involving kids, a custody dispute, homeschooling, and then a neighbor's complaint about odor, What specific best practices steps would you recommend so this kind of outcome is less likely to happen in the future? So you got to assume that by the 19th to the 23rd, why did I keep on saying 6 days? It's 4 days. My math is off. I woke up too early today. But let's say 19th to the 23rd, it's 4 days where there may still be no resolution. Is there a point where the husband could have got tired and stopped calling police because he didn't want to be that nuisance? Or at that point, would you have the heightened urgency? Like, guys, we're going on now from the 15th, or what is it these days? From the 13th to the 19th, that's 6 days, 4 calls made in 6 days. And now the 23rd is when they discover that's 10 days. 10 days here.
Yeah.
I have no contact with my family.
That's a lot. And, you know, a lot of times in law enforcement, we have internal conversations about these things. And we want to maintain authority in the community. When you see this, and again, hindsight, you could say that's a lot of days to not see a family and have not gone in to check. You know, the purpose of an internal affairs investigation, whether it's based on something that an officer has done, and you want to know for the integrity of the agency and the integrity of the officer, you investigate it. We see these things happen. So internally, what I would suggest every department do is look at your policy, use this case as your anchor. Okay, this happened. The chances of this happening before are real. They have happened. We've had these things before, which means we're going to have them in the future. So what are we doing for our policy going forward from here? You know, we have to look at where mistakes were made so that we can not make them in the future. This is how all policy, you know, there's a joke in law enforcement out there, you know, where does policy come from? Comes from the midnight shift. You know, whatever these guys and girls are out there doing with limited supervision in the middle of the night usually leads to a department policy because, you know, they do something, whatever. Cases like this can also lead to changing the perceptions of how we do these things. You know, what is our policy? What is our procedure? What are we going to do forward so that we don't fall into this situation where, you know, the impetus here at the end was the call from the neighbor that smelled dead bodies and saw flies on the window. You know, then I'm sure they keyed in because we all know when you go to a call and you smell that smell and you see the flies on the window, you know there's somebody dead inside. And at that point, would there be an internal so to speak? Gee, why didn't we go in after the second call? Why did we not go into the house? What decisions were made and why? And you'd have to flesh them all out and find out, okay, Sergeant Jones, Lieutenant Smith, when you heard that call the third time, why did you not go into the apartment? You know, because we see it, what happened at the end. There was a concerned call. We checked the building. It didn't look like anything out of the ordinary. And, you know, 6 days later, there's 6 dead bodies on the floor drawing flies. How do we close that gap? That's got to be an internal conversation. And that's how these things happen. That's how we find out we need to do better. You know, as a strange kind of a connection, when we had guys show up and hijack airplanes, now we have TSA to check because we learned, gee, we weren't thinking about this before. And somebody got on a plane, took airplanes and committed a huge terrorist incident. Maybe we should think that could happen again. And how are we going to prevent it? You create a policy. We created an entire agency to make sure that this doesn't happen again. So what can agencies do? Look internally at their policy and procedure and training and use this case as the nexus for coming up with a policy, training, and procedures.
Yeah, there's before we go, there's an article real quick by Daily Mail that had some interesting updates. I just want to bear with me for 1 second. I just want to go through it. It'll be quick. It's just a recent article. Let me open it. It's the chilling last messages that the dad received. I just want to read it real quick. Let me. This will be quick, guys. I just felt that this had some interesting stuff to be covered. Let me get rid of this. What the hell? Trying to get rid of, there it goes. All right, let me get rid of this. So let me, damn, all the ads that pop up. Okay, let me just go through this real quick. It'll be quick. Chilling last message, ex-wife and her mom. Chilling last message dad received before his 4 kids, ex-wife and her mom were found poisoned. A grieving father has broken his silence after tragedy struck his family when his 4 children were found dead in their home alongside their mother and grandmother in what police suspect was a poisoning. The bodies of the family were found dead inside their apartment in Mechanicville, a small town upstate New York, on Tuesday. The identities were revealed to be Amy Stedman, 64, her daughter, Sarah Myers, 44, and 4 grandchildren, Harper, 13, Hudson, 11, and Gavin and Graceland, both 10. They were twins. Mechanicville Police Department Chief William Rabbit said at a press conference on Thursday that the bodies were recovered after authorities responded to a welfare check. An autopsy concluded that one of the children suffered fatal blunt force injuries. Rabbit added that authorities recovered evidence indicating intentional poisoning. Guys, I talked about all these in our theories. I just want to go through this article. The chief told reporters that authorities also located a note at the scene along with circumstantial evidence strongly suggesting that Stedman was involved. That's the grandmother or the mother, Sarah. The children's father, Brady Harmon, has now spoken out about the tragedy, revealing that he had been involved in a custody battle with Myers and that the children were set to spend the summer with him in Utah. He told the U.S. Sun that he and Myers married in 2015 but separated 4 years later, and that it was the last time he saw his children. There's a picture of him with the children now. Brady Harmon, the children's father, has spoken to multiple news outlets about an ongoing custody battle. There he is with Sarah and the children. And then there he is again. Who's children? That's Brady. And then there were some more pictures here, but I kind of showed you them in the backdrop. But I wanted to. Harmon said he last spoke to his children on June 7th, but received text from Myers on June 10th that they were sick. She messaged me, "Hey, the kids are sick. We'll talk to you on the 11th," he said. The same day, Harmon said his lawyer sent her paperwork regarding an upcoming custody hearing on 29th. I'll be honest with you, I even discussed in theory that could be the time when the kids were already dead. Now she's trying to manage the story because maybe she couldn't produce the kids. So I don't know if that pushed them over the edge because, like, oh my gosh, he's actually has a lawyer that's going to do his job, and we don't know a way out of this. So let's do the next best thing. He'll never have access to these kids, and then do what they did. He speculated. After he learned his children were sick, Harmon said he called police multiple times to ask for welfare checks. So maybe he thought something was up. Harmon added that he consistently spoke with his children on FaceTime, like Joe mentioned how important that is, and tried to get them excited about their upcoming summer visit to Utah. He described his children to the New York Post as happy little kids, adding Harper and Grace would show me their drawings, Hudson would show me their cat, and Gavin would show me something he built. Harmon said that Stedman had lived with him and Myers at one point during their marriage. That's the kids there. That's Sarah with the kids. That's one of her last posts, I believe. And there's the grandmother or her mother, Stedman, Amy. He described the grandmother as not being warned, but admitted that she was doting and would spoil the children. Harmon speculated during an interview with Spectrum News that Myers and Stedman committed the crime together. And all because they were going to spend 60 days with me, 60 days in 6.5 years. I finally get 60 days and I get this thrown in my face, he added, referring to the upcoming Utah trip. He goes, I've been fighting for so long to be able to have access to them, fighting so long to be part of their lives and show them there's something different. He continued, almost to that finish line, have my legs cut out from me and gutted because someone decided to take my kids away from me. Harmon told local ABC affiliate News 10 that he discovered his kids were gone just 2 days before Father's Day. No mother, no same mother, parent, or anything would sit there and allow that to happen, he said. Who would do that to a child, especially your own child, grandchild? So the funny thing is, Joe, before we go, is that a lot of people think there were some family secrets that maybe she didn't want exposed. And then the other thing I'm seeing with the child that was stabbed, I saw a couple of things. I believe that either what could have happened is the initial stabbing of that child, if that was first, could have been that the child wanted to be with the father. They didn't want that. Maybe the stabbing was just in that moment. Then they decided, hell, now we're done. Might as well everybody get taken out. Whoever did the stabbing, it could have been the mother or it could have been the grandmother, who knows, or it could have been the mother, but then the grandma doing the note to protect her daughter. Or we have a plan. They're gonna go to him for 2 months. We're never gonna get him back. So the mother, I still think the mother and the grandmother were involved, even though they only said the grandmother. They invite them to the house and to the mother's apartment, the grandmother's apartment, and that's where the poisoning happens. I'm sure it was aggressive because it looks like they were given needles. So I'm sure the kids may not have been so willing. Maybe I know what was happening, but I think a 13-year-old would have known. and be like, maybe the 13-year-old, I'm thinking the older one with the stab wounds could have been resistant, or I'm thinking another thing is that maybe they could have poisoned the kids, the wife, the mother, whatever it is, and then knowing that they've been poisoned, all of a sudden one of the kids don't die as expected. The mother, out of desperation, stabs one of the kids to ensure that no one makes it out of this alive, or the grandmother does. We don't know what the note says, but it could be the grandmother on her own, a shared partnership. I just find it very hard to believe that the mother was not involved, because I would expect the resistance to be from the mother and the stab wounds be on the mother. But any theories on this, Joe, or we're going to leave that out?
I tell you, the investigation that's going on, we don't know all those facts. We don't know what was in the note, but what we do know is human nature. As an investigator, I can't base what I think might have happened on how I would have handled it. This is what a lot of people do. Well, I would have never done. I could never say that. I wouldn't do that. When people, and only because we have a history of people doing these kind of things, killing their children, is a response that we do see in custody battles. That, well, that guy's no good for my kids. And I think what you're saying there is, a good investigative hypothesis. So we put all these things in boxes, all these different potentials. And we look at it and say, okay, now let's investigate each one thoroughly. I believe this is what happened. And if you focus all your attention on that, you might miss what it really is, right? So that's what I try and teach. But when we look at this, I'm thinking, stabbing your child to death is a very painful, emotional action. So when everything that you laid out there in the scenarios, my hypothesis here would be that they poisoned everyone and the one child didn't go down.
That's
what are we going to do? And at that point, based on cases I've worked, there's an urgency to end this. We're committed. We gave them all the poison. We're all going to die. And this kid's still running around. I got to take the kid out because it's for the kid's best good. We're all going to be together.
Like you said, the stabbing could be personal or it could be desperate. I mean, but the two likely theories I have do center on some level of either resistance from, if it is the older kid, we don't know who was stabbed yet, or you're right. He maybe the stabbing wasn't planned. I don't think the stabbing was planned either way. I think there's something.
He would have stabbed them all, I think.
That
would have been the method of execution. I think the poisoning was now when we look at, again, another area of investigation in suicides, we know that women often take lethal actions, but not the same lethal actions that men generally take. Men shoot themselves in the head, hang themselves. Women overdose and die. Stabbing your own child to death, even if you're in the mental state to think that this is the best thing I can do for these kids, they should be with me, they shouldn't be with him, it'll be horrible for them, so we're all going to go and we're going to take you with me. You would think that stabbing was not pre-planned, that was a last minute decision to take that particular victim out, that child. The autopsies are going to tell us a lot. When was the drugs administered? What kind of drugs? What are the effects of those drugs? The different weights and sizes of the children will help us determine, the little ones.
Could they tell the order? Because I was thinking, like, hypothetically, I'm thinking that a couple of things could have happened. If it's, say, with the poison route, which was obviously what they believe, is that maybe the mother could have been taken out first as a way for the grandmother to protect her daughter from, if it's totally the grandmother involved, not the daughter, or even if it is the daughter involved, maybe the plan was, either way, we know they don't want the husband to get these kids. So maybe the mother gets taken out first and the grandmother makes the promise that she'll handle all this and she won't have to see it. Or the mother's taken out last, but then when you have one child that wouldn't die, maybe the grandmother steps up and she kills the child, not putting the pressure on the mother. I mean, it sounds weird, but is there any way that the grandmother in a warped mind could think that she's doing this for her daughter to somehow protect her daughter?
Absolutely. We have seen so many of these bizarre cases where people get these thoughts in their head, this is the right thing to do. We saw John List many years ago. He killed his entire family and then he took off for a new life. Well, that's a different kind of a motive. But we have seen people that you're not getting these kids for lots of different reasons. You're unfit, you're no good, they're my kids, and I'm going to kill them all. And we're all going to go together. We see this. This is not an unknown phenomenon in the world of human relations. The autopsies, because it sounds like obviously by the time there's flies and everything, there's a lot of decomposition, and that starts rapidly, depending on the temperature, all those kind of things speed that up. The heat might have been on, whatever, it's going to change the rate, but decomposition starts pretty quickly. So being able to tell specifically which child died first, I don't know if they can do that, but they will be able to tell if there are, and again, depending on the condition of the bodies, if they can examine all their arms and see if they can see puncture wounds, because you can see that into the muscle as well as not just on the skin, on the surface. You'd be able to see those kind of things. If there's too much decomposition, they may never be able to conclusively say that. What's in the note? You leave a note for what reason? If you accidentally killed everyone, why would you leave a note?
Who is she writing to?
Who is she writing to? Is she explaining? Are they throwing a dart at the father? You think you're getting these kids. Well, now they're all with me. All of these things, that note is very, very important to what happened and the motivation and who did what.
The note could be even to clear her daughter's name, even if her daughter was involved. Maybe the last instinct from her is to protect her daughter and take the fall on her own. Right.
It could be. We can go on and on with the individual human potentials of why they did it. Maybe the mother says, hey, if we have to do this to keep them from the kids, then I have no life left. So I'm going to go too. We're all going to do this together. We'll all be together, right? We'll all be as strange as that sounds.
No, I get it.
There has been cases where people survived going through something like this, and they say, well, that was the thought. We would all be
together in death.
Right. I can't, kill myself and leave my kids here because this wouldn't be right. So I'm going to take everybody with me. We're all going to go together through this kind of a thing. That's going to come down to, well, first of all, that note's going to be good. Then you can, psychologically, forensically go back and interview everybody that know these people, everybody they were involved with. Usually these kind of things don't just pop up on a Tuesday morning. All right, I'm going to kill myself and all my kids. There's some impetus that led them to that. Now, when I say it doesn't just pop up, it's something that it could be in a short period of time. Okay, he's got a lawyer, like you said. He's getting these kids, and we know because of these circumstances in my life, they're not going to give them back to me. So therefore, what am I going to do? And you contemplate. We're all going to go. We're all going together. Mm-hmm. That might be over a couple of days where that decision. Then how do you do it? How does the average person know how to kill everybody with what substance? You go online, and there's probably an online trail of them looking up what's the easiest drug I can get to commit suicide. What's the easiest way, the painless way to do whatever. And it's out there. That information is out there.
And even if they were sloppy with it wouldn't matter because they weren't planning on being caught anyway. So, right. It doesn't matter if you find these things out digitally because we were planning to do the murder and then the suicide. And the unique thing is what triggered it, which I believe is the fact that they were going to the father's house, whether there's family secrets or whether they did this to spite the husband. Like maybe this whole custody battle became about win and losing. And they lost the focus of the children. And at the end, you know what? You're not going to win these children as if the children are trophies or if the children are a symbol of the win. So we're going to take that from you. So even though on paper, you may have won somewhat of this battle, you're going to lose the war because the trophy, the children, because I don't know, in order to do this, you would have to have some mentality that the children have become objects. And with the context of a custodial battle, it's win-loss, or the children seen as trophies. And if that's the case, killing the kids doesn't allow for the trophy to go to the person who won the custodial battle. And whether it's the mother, whether it's Sarah or whether it's Amy, I still believe that somewhere along the line, I don't think the grandmother made this decision in the dark. I think something is with the mother where she maybe told her this is what it is and was able to have some control of her daughter to the point where the daughter either accepted the plan or instigated. We don't know. And the grandmother just took the fall for it. But they were all at Amy's apartment. So you have to assume that there may have been some level of control because they were at Amy's apartment. Either something happened in the moment where they said, you know what, we're desperate, let's just take it all out, or this was planned. But I think, to be honest, like you mentioned too, there was a time constraint. We had another legal concern coming her way. There was desperation. They felt they had to act now. So, if it was planned out, then that's what probably led to the poison, very planned out. And then he didn't die the way, or one of the children didn't die as expected. So they probably wait for the children to be at peace. So then they can go ahead and kill themselves, or however. Then it turns out that one child didn't die, so that maybe the grandmother stepson will see who. They should be able to know who held that knife, that put that knife inside that child. And if it was the 13-year-old, it's a 13-year-old child, it would be a little bit harder to manage. So would you have two people on the child? Would you have the mother holding the child and the grandmother stabbing the child, or vice versa? It is a 13-year-old child, or were they incapacitated but still breathing, and then they just, right, finish the child off? You're right, Joe. There's so many theories.
When you look at something, one of the things that when I teach criminal investigation is that I talk about letting the crime scene and the condition of the victims speak to you. And what that means is, we rush in and we see this crime scene. Well, things happen in order. They happen for a reason. There's forensics evidence. There's that note. There's a lot of things here that I'm sure is under investigation where they're trying to piece this together. And you can get some type of a timeline. There are fingerprints. It's not like I wanted to murder Anthony, so I'm going to hide my Google or my other search that I did to find out how to kill Anthony, because I want to get away with it, right? And I just want to kill him. But excuse me, like you said, in a murder-suicide, they're done. In their mind, they're done. They're going to do this and they're out. They're not worried about getting caught or getting in trouble. So there'll be much more information. And one of the things I know about human beings is that it doesn't have to make sense to the rest of us. It made sense to them at the time to do this. The theories, the daughter could have decided, well, my mother can't live with all of us. It'll be miserable. So I'll poison her first, and then I'll take out the kids and myself. It could have went in any direction, but that note, who wrote the note, who they wrote it to, and what they say in there is gonna help a lot, I would think, into the motivation, the reasoning, and maybe even the timing.
What happened? And guys, we always start with the generalities, and then the generalities based on what the evidence says, and then you see what fits into those generalities, and then eventually you could start drawing specifics from each one of those avenues, and then you kind of roll the dice as what's probable, what's likely, even though you have to pretty much entertain everything, but you will focus on what is more likely, and obviously at this point that note is key, because who's she writing to? Does it sound like it's an apology? Does it sound like she's trying to cover for her daughter, like the daughter's to focus on this and not so much the kids? Like, I mean, in the letter, is she putting remorse for what she's done, or is she trying to clear her daughter's name? Right. There's a lot of things there that can provide you with the motive. What's behind the letter, who she wrote to, how it was written, could tell you a lot of what happened in the moment, even if it's not spelled out.
So we're thinking it's a murder-suicide note. It could have been a letter the mother was writing to the father of the kids, talking about, how she's going to help work this out. We don't know until we see it. And that's why, it's good to speculate, because people come up with ideas and this and that. But an investigation that's sensitive like this, that there's a lot of moving parts, only the investigators know, and they're going to try and piece that together. The other thing that I will say about this is, because this is a case of such notoriety, and people are going to second guess everything the police agency did not going into that apartment on day one or day two. That also creates a tension in the investigation that, okay, did we do something wrong? And we have to still investigate this. Are we liable? Like you said, are we liable that we didn't go in there? What's going to happen down the road? And now you got this powder keg of people trying to investigate it. They don't know what's going on. Or maybe it'll come out they did everything right, just based on the facts that they had. And we won't know that till the whole investigation comes out. And that is why you investigate. If they did things wrong, then that has to be corrected and people are held accountable for what they did. That's an internal investigation, right? That would restore integrity to the agency so the community could have confidence in the leadership, the officers, and everything else. If it turns out that they didn't do anything purposely wrong, they weren't malicious in doing what they did, maybe they had a lot of calls, maybe they had other things going on, we'll find that out too. And can we put something in place to prevent this from happening again?
And
right?
that's
really the key
dialogue here. And guys, I'm sure I've got to find out how they confirmed it was the grandmother who wrote the letter. That's also key. But I also find out that in my experience, when there are suicide letters, the letters have some level of honesty in them, even if it's regards to how they feel. Like the facts may be a little bit distorted based on their perspective, but usually the feeling, the undertone, whether questionable or not, is usually how they feel about the circumstances or whatever. Whether it's agreed with us or not, it's their perspective. So the note itself, I would think the note itself is either going to be the grandma taking on some level of full accountability to protect her daughter's name, which makes me think also, because I mean, the funny thing is, was the letter written before the deed? Was the grandmother the last person to die? That all matters to me too. But you're right. There's so many things in play, but the one thing that we know well, you don't even know definitively, but I would lean towards, because of the timing of it all, is the custody battle. And then it's a matter of why and when, how, and all this other stuff. You already know where. So I do believe ultimately it comes down to some level of control where the children became objects, they became the trophy, and they just didn't want the ex-husband, Brady Harmon.
And we see that in custody battles all the time, where the kids are used as pawns. I'm going to teach you a lesson. I'm not going to let the kid go with you on Friday afternoon. Too bad. Yeah, we see this all the time, and it's the studies are showing that the children see that and the children experience it. And I know a lot of people that have gone through it, where the kids are used as weapons, as cudgels against the other person, and control. These are all human conditions that when we see a thing like this, if we're not in that mindset, we say, none of this makes any sense. Well, when people are in that mindset, what makes sense to them is what's important, not what we can imagine how we would do it. The key to this tragedy is to learn from it on multiple levels. The police department needs to learn what they did right and wrong, and they need to put things in place so it doesn't happen again. The rest of us, we can take this and examine our own lives. Can something get so desperate that someone would do a thing like this? Well, no, not in my life. You don't know, right? You have to be aware of the fact that unless this woman was suicidal and crazy before all this happened, she got put in this based on circumstances in her life that sound like they got out of control, and she made a decision. Now, to us, it doesn't make sense to make it, but to her and her mother, it obviously did.
And it does ultimately come down to them not wanting to have the husband have the children, only because even if it was a secret they didn't want exposed, you wouldn't normally kill the child over that. You would just basically say, well, I don't want them to be with him to expose that. So somewhere along the line, the custodial battle is relevant to what happened. It's not that it was the secret, that if there is a secret, which I don't know if that's the case, that's the anchor of it all, but rather the chance that they could lose custody forever. Because let's say there was a secret to expose, which I don't know if that's the case. Let's say there was. What would be the outcome? That they would lose custody.
Right.
Ultimately, the outcome would be that they would lose custody. So I think ultimately, if you look at what happened, it's a very selfish motive to keep the children connected with them, even in death, and to not allow that connection to be established with the father. And if you want to take a look at another level, the win-loss of the custody battle, you won, we lost, you're not getting the trophy.
Right.
Anything you like to say in closing as we wrap
Well,
up, Joe?
and I would, and I think one of the last things I would think about, in my books, I try and give these concepts. Words mean things. In our society, in our world, sayings mean things. Titles that we give ourselves. So I think somewhere in there you said one of the women used the term mama bear. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
What is a mama bear in our society today? She's a woman who will do anything to protect her children. You don't mess with the mama bear, right? We see that out in the forest. You walking on a trail and you get between mama and the babies, and that mama bear is going to kill you, tear you apart, going to do anything she can to protect them babies. So the term mama bear, to me, I think there's something reflective in that, in the motivation and mentality of what was going on. Mama bear protects. And this is an extreme case of protecting the children by removing them from the horror that they may face. I think it could be an important element in this whole thing to understand why things happen. And that's how minute an investigation has to become. It comes down to one word somebody says. That's the meaning of why everything else happened. So complex investigations like this are not easy. Getting the right amount of training, the right amount of experience is extremely important for all of our law enforcement agencies, because you never know when this is going to happen in your town, and then it's your responsibility to do the right thing.
Yep. And I keep the grandmother involved, one, because it happened in her apartment. And, I don't know if the mother really wanted to keep the children from the father, she could have done it in her apartment, away from. Why pull the grandmother in unless this was fueled by the grandmother and this was an agreement where no one's left behind. Yeah. So no one has to go through grieving process, because at the end of the day, no one's going to be left behind. We're going to do this as a family unit. And that's where I could see where the grandmother could have joined in on the process. So if it was led by the mother, like I like what you said, you have the mama bear prospect. I agree with that. Mama bear is very protective, right? So don't know what to do. And whoever initiates the plan, the point is you could have maybe the grandmother saying, this is the best way to preserve our family unit, so we're never separated, so we never have to feel the loss, is that we all go down together. And by the way, the loss for them was literally, it started with feeling that they would lose the children when they lost them through custody. So now there's no way that they would take the children's lives without taking their own, especially now for the grandma who supposedly was close. No way she's going to be left as a lone survivor. Right. So technically, it makes sense. You have control. You have no one feeling abandoned. And I think what Joe said, the forensic, the notes, the whatever they could have searched, I don't think there'll be an effort to cover up anything. I think because they never expected to be found. So I think the investigators may be able to get a clear picture because they had no reason to cover it up, because they were going to go the distance anyway. Yeah. Right. All right, guys, that's it. Great show, Joe. I'll post it up immediately. And thank you for coming on. Hopefully to have you on again. If you have any areas, other cases you're covering, let me know. If we're running the same cases, I would love to hear your perspective on almost anything we cover. And as always, guys, I do have Buy Me a Cup of Coffee. Link to that in the description, as well as top of the YouTube channel. Stay safe. That was a